Now, the next settings that we need to go over, if we go up to the settings pull-down menu, is the user settings. This is what's stored in your profile. And this is what's going to make Edius really unique to your editing style and the way that you want to be able to do it. So let's go through these one at a time, just like we did with the system settings. And we'll take a look at what each one of these things do. First off, underneath application, timeline will already be highlighted unless you've come in here and gone to another one. The first one is extend clips when applying transition or crossfade. I keep this one checked, and the reason being is I one time had a 500 picture montage that I was doing for a high school. They had sent me the pictures overnight mail, and I set all the pictures down. I put the music underneath it, and I had all the pictures cut just perfectly. Everything was great. The only thing that I forgot to put transitions in between. Now, this wasn't checked at the time. And so when I sat there and selected all the clips and put a dissolve in between all the clips, all of a sudden, because the clips were overlapping each other, now 3 songs are sitting out there at the very end with no clips over them. All the timing is gone. Everything is ruined. And I had to basically sit there and redo it. However, with this checked, what would have happened is that when I dropped those transitions in, the cut point would have stayed exactly at the same place on the timeline, and it would have extended each one of the clips in order for that dissolve to go on it, meaning that the duration and where those clips were on the timeline would not have been changed at all. And you'll see how that kind of works as we go through editing. I also have insert default crossfade in transition. All that means is when I place a transition in, if there's audio also touching from those 2 clips, it'll place a default crossfade in there. However, I have unchecked the insert default transition when I do an audio crossfade because I don't always want to transition and when that's going to happen. The only other thing I have clipped here really is show tooltip during the trim. That's kind of nice because it does actually show me time code and it shows me what I'm doing with that clip while I'm trimming it. The snap to event, this is kind of cool because of the fact that it allows you to decide what do you want your cursor to snap to. If you only want it to snap to a clip, that's great. Or if you want it to snap to like a rubber band or to a sequence marker or to a clip marker. So you can pick and choose which things that you want to be able to jump to and have the cursor snap to when it gets close to those things. Right here underneath default, I've got to tell you something, guys. This window right here is one of the most important windows to me. Number one, I leave sync mode on and I turn ripple mode off. I do not want to start up with ripple mode. Yes, there are times when I've seen people use it, but 90% of the time, ripple mode is just going to cause you a headache because it makes everything ripple. So if you sit there and manipulate the video and the audio underneath it isn't manipulated, all of a sudden you're going to get what I call the red box of death. It has white numbers in it telling you just how many frames you're out of sync. So if I'm going to use ripple, I turn it on and off from the timeline. I leave it completely off though when I start up my projects. I don't want it there. Insert override mode for what we're doing and the way I'm going to be teaching this. Insert's the best. The waveform, you have 2 different choices. You have log, which is dB, or linear, which is percentage. Please put it on linear. Log just basically is very, very grouped together and very, very large looking, and it's very hard to see distinctly like when somebody's talking. However, in linear mode, it takes a lot of that out, and it's very easy to see where there are breaks in the sound and everything, so I always put it on linear mode. Now, brand new to Edius 6.5 is the clip thumbnail. It used to be just an in, just an out, or nothing. Now it's in plus out, or all. So in other words, you have what's called the wonderful film strip effect going on with it. I know film strip effect is very popular with people who edit on the timeline and like to do the trimming on the timeline. However, I just leave it on in and out because of the fact that I do a lot of my trimming up in the player window. Not to mention the fact it takes up a bunch of memory. You know, the pictures have to be stored somewhere, and sometimes it can slow the computer down. So if you find after you turn that on, some of your real-time performance has gone a little weird on you, try turning it off and just going to in and out and see what happens right there. Match frame, basically when you hit the F key, if I'm sitting up in the source window, it's going to jump down to the timeline and find the next instance, or if I set this as previous, the previous instance of that exact frame. What tracks do I want to target? Do I want to target all tracks or just choose the basic tracks I want, whether it be A tracks or T tracks or VA tracks or V tracks, or just selected tracks? I basically leave it on all tracks. Background job. I have this checked constantly. Pause background jobs during playback because I don't want anything taking up any of the CPU power during playback in case I've got a lot of heavy stuff there. So it'll just pause any background jobs that are going on and allow it to play with all power. And then when you stop playback, the background job will start back up again. Now, proxy mode. This is something that's fairly new to Edius. You'll notice I have both checked here. It says when there is no proxy, use high res and automatically generate a proxy. Basically means that if I'm going to be doing some layering, like let's say I have AVC HD and I want to do 5, 6, 7 layers and my computer isn't quite powerful enough to be able to handle 6 or 7 layers of AVC HD, then when I go into proxy mode, proxies are already going to be created because when I brought it in to begin with, in the background, it's created those proxies. So I can work with those proxies. And it's just as easy as turning proxy on and off to go back and forth between seeing what the high def files look like and working with the proxy files. And we'll look at that once again while we're editing. Project file, I'm going to change this. Now here's my project file folder, and this is the one I've already set up. But I'm actually going to place type project name here with about 5 exclamation points. And the reason being is I trained a station 5, 6 years ago. And we went through all this wonderful training and these guys were editing. I babysat them during their morning show for like 3 weeks. And one day a guy's just yelling at me, Mike, get over here as quick as you can. And I ran up and he sat there and said, I've got my time slot's coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And I've got to get this old piece of footage, to put in here. And I looked at the history on their server and I basically looked at him and said, dude, you're screwed. And the reason I said that is because every single file was named untitled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In other words, they never bothered naming, even though I told them to name them, they never bothered naming them. So I always type this in here to where people look at it, they read it and go, oh, I need to put something there. All the rest of this is basically just standard stuff. The autosave, you can select a folder or project folder and you can tell it how the number of files you want in there and how often. You can go down to 1 minute if you want to. And basically this just means that if Edius locked up for some reason or the computer turned off, when you came back, the last autosave file would be there for you. Underneath other is just the stuff that they really couldn't find anywhere else. But see, in my profile, I want to save my window positions. I want to show my tool tips. I want to create a waveform cache when registering the clip. In other words, bringing it into the bin window. And this is all, guys, this is all stock. In other words, I haven't changed this thing here. So just go ahead and use the default. Underneath preview on playback, pre-roll of 3 seconds, basically meaning it'll go to the point I want to play back and then go 3 seconds before it to kind of get your mind and everything up to speed. I just have continue playback when editing checked, but this one is the most important one to me. Combine filter layers and track layers for effect settings. The reason I have this checked is because of the fact that if I'm doing a few picture-in-a-pictures, I want to be able to see them all, everything above and below what I'm working on so that I can position it correctly. And when you don't have this checked, it's not going to show you certain things. So basically I have this checked because I want to be able to see everything. And the rest of this, once again, is just default and I just leave it right there. This monitor, you have a choice. If you have 2 monitors, you can pick which one you want for full screen playback. So if I'm playing something back and I have 2 monitors and I set the right monitor as my playback one, as I'm playing it back, if I double click in the overlay window, that monitor will go full screen. Now, because we only have 1 screen here, I can still play back full screen, but it's going to be just on this monitor. So I don't really have a choice on this. My on-screen display, once again, I leave it completely default. This is just basically telling you where do you want your time code and your audio levels and everything to be on the screen while you're playing back. On the overlay, just leave this default. It's fine the way it is unless you have a particular reason for doing it. And also pre-roll editing, same thing. Just leave it default. Now, underneath user interface, this is where you can come in and change things. In other words, you'll notice this pull down up here. I can do player left, center right, and right. So I can go in and change buttons, delete buttons, add buttons if I want to, but yet keep the look and feel of it basically the same. And the way to do that is very simple. If I'm on the timeline and I want to take one of these buttons and move it over to the timeline, then I can sit here and say, you know what I want to do? I want to filter this and I want to say fade. Okay, there's a fade out right there. So I'm going to select fade out and I'm going to place it over here right before create new sequence and I'm going to apply it. Now, I don't know if you noticed over here on the left-hand side, just to the left of it, but now right next to my new sequence over here on the timeline, there's the button right there. It's just literally that easy to be able to do. So that's how you work with buttons. This is showing you in the windows, in the overlay windows, do I want to see the total? Do I want to see duration? Do I want to see what the time code is on my in and out? And you can also make it larger and smaller depending upon the size of your display. This tells you whether you want to see the shuttle and slider or not. And this basically says, do I want to see the buttons in my player and recorder windows? You know, like the play and record buttons. Once again, I leave all of this basically on the default. Keyboard shortcuts. This is where you can come in and change or add keyboard shortcuts. Let me show you. If I hit it and do it by assignment, you'll see all the assignments right there, but I'm not even halfway down yet, and I start hitting unassigned. Look at this, no assignment. All these different keyboard shortcuts that you have that you can go in and you can change. Neat thing about this, if you add them, change them, do whatever you want to do to them, you can actually export it to a file, put it on a thumbnail drive, and when you go somewhere else, then you could import into that Edius and be able to have all of your keyboard shortcuts sitting right there. And by the way, the same is true with the profiles. You can do the exact same thing with the profiles. You can export them and import them also. To do something, I'm just going to pick one right here. It says no assignment. I'm going to hit assign. And you can see here that here, when I highlight a clip, it's going to tell me of all the different combinations that used in. Anything that's white has not been used. Anything in yellow has. But notice if I hold Control and Alt down, notice how much of it is white now. You'll see the blue on Control and Alt. I can pick any one of these now and assign that, and that function will be assigned to that keyboard shortcut from then on. That's all you have to do. Now, if you've crud up and you go in and go, oh, crud, I really did something dumb, you can just go to default and it will go back to default if you need to. But that's how easy it is to be able to do. It shows you which ones you have, and plus, when you hold down the keys, it shows you which ones are used and which ones are not. The bin, this is just showing you in list mode all the different things that you can have right there. Here's window color. Don't screw with this. I'm going to show you just for fun. It really doesn't do all that much but make Edius look really, really nasty. So I'm going to go back to the default on it. So I wouldn't screw with that at all. On my source, duration, how long do I want a still image to be when it first comes in? It just basically gives it a duration right there. How long do I want titles to be? Do I want to automatically add a title mixer to it? In other words, a fade up and fade down if I put it in a title track. Do I want to add it between an in and out? If I set an in and out, kind of like a 3-point edit, if I want to be able to do that. V-mute, how long I want to have that be. And our rubber band points, auto add frames inside, meaning that if I'm using the mixer, and I'm writing the audio levels live, how often do I want a node to be placed? Automatic correction, I leave this completely and totally on its default. Restore offline clip, right now, just leave it on the default. Partial transfer, however, is important. In other words, if you're coming from a media such as XDCam and you go straight off the media and put it in the source window and set ins and outs, it's going to do a partial transfer. And I click these two right here. I automatically do that partial transfer when I've added from the player to the timeline, or when I've taken a subclip and placed it over in the bin window. In the background, what it's going to do is it's going to automatically take that in and out, and it's going to copy that off of the original media and bring it in its native format to the hard drive to where I don't have to have that media there anymore after I get through doing all of my editing. And then last but not least, input controller. You can see that we have the MKB88. This is where you can program it, or this controller right here. This is where you could program that one right there. And guys, that's basically the user settings. Now remember, all of this is going to be stored in your profile. So basically anything you change here, every time your profile comes up, this is how Edius is going to work.